So why don't I give a little demonstration on each one of them, but then I think it makes sense for you guys to be able to play on them for as long as possible. So I'm just wondering, does everybody know what this instrument is before we get started? Okay, I'll tell you. It's a harpsichord, and we're going to be talking about different ways of making sound right now. So the harpsichord has its own mechanism. This is a clavichord, which again creates the sound in a different way. And this is a forte piano, which is the closest that we have to what we're used to playing the modern piano. So if you want to come around, I can give you a demonstration of how does the harpsichord create its sound. So this is a plucking mechanism. So I can move this. And if you want to come up here, you can see that there's a little plectrum. So it looks like a little tongue that actually, so this is the string that actually plucks the string like this. So this is the sound of a harpsichord. So it has a very different sound from a modern piano. What are some of the characteristics of this sound? Can somebody give me what does it sound like to you? What is the difference between a modern piano and this? So if I play something that is a very, very famous composition, so the sound is not as warm and round as a modern piano. It's much clearer. It's some people say that it's more silvery and shimmery sound. And also the plucked sound makes people think of maybe a lute or a harp even. So the kind of articulation that we go for in Baroque music, where we want to have a clear, transparent texture, and when we have a thick contrapuntal texture, where we try to bring out certain voices and we try to play so every note is very clear, I would say that it's already built into this instrument because the sound itself is cleaner and a little bit thinner. So that's what I would say right now about the harpsichord. If I play a note on the harpsichord and I try to play it very quietly, this is what I get. If I try to play very loudly, there's no difference in dynamic contrast. So a lot of the harpsichord technique is actually creating the illusion of dynamics. So a lot of techniques that harpsichordists use are something like rolling chords, dislocating the hands to bring out certain notes. So let me give you an impression of that. So here, so we can roll a chord in a slow way. I'll do that again. What if I do this? Does one sound louder than the other? It's an illusion. It's not actually louder, but actually the way that we can roll things and the timing of our musical gestures can give the illusion of stress or character. So that's something that a harpsichordist often does, is rolling things at their own speed. Then there's something like when you're bringing out a melody, so the Goldberg. So what did I just do? I didn't play the notes completely together. That's what it would sound like. But I'm trying to bring out the top voice. So I separate the notes slightly. So we have the impression it's kind of like a singer coming in, and the two things are not equal. I'll give you another example of a Scarlatti sonata. So if I played, so I'm playing a little bit quicker now to create direction in the phrase. But then I want to do a little bit of a diminuendo to end the phrase. If I played the notes together, it wouldn't create, you know, a nice tail to the phrase. So what I end up doing is dislocating the notes to create an impression of a kind of a weaker note. So let me just show you that again. So these are some techniques that a harpsichordist would use to create all the things that we try to do in music, to create shape, to create character, to create dynamic contrast. So we've heard that the harpsichord is very, very good at short clipped notes. So the kind of articulation that we often do when we're playing detached music. But I also wanted to show you an example of playing on the harpsichord that's not only staccato, which is kind of what people assume of the harpsichord. A lot of what we do on the harpsichord is actually, instead of highlighting that plucked sound, we actually try to hide the pluck and create a little bit more of a longer sonority as well. So I'm going to play a little bit of a piece right now by François Couperin, and it's called Les Barricades Mystérieuses, where you guys can look at the score actually. Every single note they're telling you to overhold throughout the entire piece. So we're creating more of a lush texture, and nothing is detached at all. So I'll just play a little bit of it. A sense of the range that's also possible on an instrument like this. So when we're talking about harpsichord music, we're talking about composers like Bach, Scarlatti, Couperin. Baroque composers would have used a harpsichord, and also the next instrument, the clavichord. So moving over to the clavichord. This clavichord, so we're talking again about how to create sound. So here we have, this is the length of the key that extends into the back, and we have these metal, they're kind of blades, but they're not very sharp. They're called tangents. And the tangent stays in contact with the string for the whole time. So basically the clavichord it is possible to have some dynamic contrast. I can play very quietly on this instrument. So there is a little bit of a range, although the instrument itself is very quiet. So it was used mainly for home use, for practice, but actually composers really respected the technique that you needed to be able to play on a clavichord. And C.P.E. Bach, who was one of J.S. Bach's sons, He wrote a very famous treatise, and he basically said that a very good harpsichordist, or let me try that again. I'm going to go the opposite way. A very good clavichordist will always be a good harpsichordist, but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. A good harpsichordist will not necessarily be a very good clavichord player. So the reason is that this instrument, if you don't play exactly on the right part of each key, it shows you get this sound that's kind of like a spit. So, okay, I'm going to play the same Bach prelude. So it has a very sweet sound. And this instrument it's a modern replica, it's a modern copy of an instrument from 1774. And so we're talking about music like C.B.E. Bach, Haydn, and Mozart. You can play on an instrument with this range, this 5-octave range. So I'll just play a little bit of a Haydn sonata, so you can hear. Markings that you find in early sonatas where it says forte and piano right after, I think they make sense when you play on an instrument like this where the dynamic range is not so huge. So in the forte section here, I can really whack the instrument and it doesn't sound like it's too much, but I have the effect of playing in a very loud way. The sound of the clavichord, which you can see is very, very different from the harpsichord, and it will be interesting to compare for the people that have Baroque music, what it feels like to play on each one of these instruments. Okay, so let's move over to the forte piano now, and this is actually an original instrument, and it's an instrument that was built in Vienna from 1835. So can somebody tell me which composers would know this instrument really well? So if we're talking about 1835, who can we think of? What romantic composer? Any ideas? Oh, I don't believe that there are no ideas. Shout out a name, romantic composer.
Probably Schubert.
Yes, Schubert is...
Schubert, Schumann.
Yes, absolutely. The Clara and Robert Schumann had an instrument just like this from the same builder that was given to them as a wedding present. So they used this instrument in their home, and they actually gave this instrument. You can see it if you go to the Musical Instrument Museum in Vienna, and they actually gave it as a gift to Brahms, who had it in his home after they let it go. So yes, the Schumanns, Schubert, Chopin, when he played in the German-speaking countries, he would have played on an instrument like this. Beethoven, at the end of his life, had a gruff instrument as well. So I'm going to play. This instrument is very interesting. Well, before I play, I'll talk about the pedals and the hammers. Okay, so the interesting thing about forte pianos, and we use that name to cover all the versions of the piano before we got to the modern piano that we use today, is that the sound is not homogeneous. It's not the same in every register of the instrument. So I can start in the top register. So this has been compared, even in its own time, to woodwind instruments. So very, very thin, reedy kind of sound. And then as you go down the instrument, it becomes a little bit warmer, kind of like a speaking voice. And then as we go further down, we've got a little bit more of a rich, especially on this instrument, there's a richer, deeper sound. So that's one thing. So you might have, in pieces of music, you might have a melody that happens in this register, the middle register, and then moves up to the higher register. And on this instrument, it would actually have a different timbre. Now the pedals were not standardized at this time. So you can find things like tambourine, like a drum pedal. You can find bassoon stops. All these things were kind of trendy at the time, but these pedals on this piano, you have the damper pedal on the right, which is the pedal that we're used to. Then you also have the una corda pedal on the far left, which is the shifting pedal, which we're also used to. And then you also have two more pedals that are called the moderators. So if you look what happens here, this is a piece of felt that gets inserted between the hammer and the strings when I actually press the pedal, and it creates a sound that's that's softer and a little bit more muffled. And then the double moderator is even further. So I'm going to play a very little bit from a famous intermezzo by Brahms, and I'm going to use a lot of these pedals and shift around with them just to see what I can experiment with this piece that we all know very well, but on a different piano. so I think there are beautiful options for, different colors, different sounds, and I'm using what's written in the score, and then using a different tool. I'm trying to realize in an original way what's written in the music, using what I think it's too bad that on a modern piano we lost this moderator pedals. But I think with instruments, having to be louder, having to be projecting in a larger space in a big concert hall, we lost this range of soft playing, which I think is too bad because it's I think a beautiful addition to the piano.